here's Ed Bernstein.
Come fly with me, let's fly away. That's why lady is a trying. It's my kind of town, Chicago is. New York, I have got you under my skin. Luck be a lady.
Well, that wasn't Ed Bernstein, but that also wasn't Frank Sinatra. that was Bob Anderson, but this is Vincent Falcone, who is conducting and leading Bob Anderson's show over at the Palazzo, but originally, led all the greats, conducted for all the greats: Sinatra, Tony Bennett, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's not probably a relevant person in that time period who you didn't work with, right?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate in that respect, yes.
Oh, is there somebody that you hadn't conducted for that you wished you had?
Yeah, there's a couple. Yeah, there's a couple people that I would have liked to have. I got to know Dean Martin, but I never was his musical director. Because Ken Lane, who was my friend, was his music director. There's a one or two, but I've gotten most of them. Jack Jones and Stephen Eady. And Diane Carroll and the McGuire sisters, and the list goes on. And it's all because of the exposure that I got from Mr. Sinatra. I guess they figured if I was good enough for him, I was good enough for them. And fortunately, I had that privilege and that honor to be with all those people, and they were all good people, great people.
How did that work? Like when you met Frank Sinatra, he had already had a list of songs. I would think that it's
oh yes.
Very famous for singing.
Certainly.
So then you start arranging for him. Do you change the music at all?
No.
Scores?
No. Any arranging that I did for him were songs that we added that he hadn't done. For instance, in the middle 70s, he decided that he wanted to maybe become a little bit more contemporary and appeal to a younger crowd. So he tried a few things, and I wrote several things for him. But they were in a more contemporary feeling. By today's standards, of course, they're not contemporary anymore, but they were in those days. A little bit more of a contemporary feeling, particularly in the rhythm section. And he liked that, and that gave me the opportunity to do some of those things.
Right. And so at that time, how did you put together an orchestra? How did you find the musicians? How does that work? Okay, like Sinatra comes up to you. Did you have your own orchestra at that time?
Well, initially, when I first went out with him, the orchestras that were working with him previous to my coming into the picture were still there. So I came to know these people, and then from then on, whenever we would go wherever we would go, I knew the people by then, and I would call the contractor and ask we usually had pretty much the same musicians wherever we went. However, if we went to a venue where the number of musicians wasn't sufficient, Mr. Sinatra was able, because of his fame, we would bring the orchestra with us. When we went to South Africa, we brought the orchestra with us. When we went to Egypt, we brought the orchestra with us.
You charter a plane and everybody just goes together?
We brought the orchestra from London to Egypt. We brought the orchestra from New York to South Africa. Things like, if we went to Winnemucca, we would bring the orchestra from Las Vegas, But I had an orchestra in LA, I had an orchestra here, I had an orchestra in New York, I had an orchestra in Chicago, had an orchestra in Miami, and that's how we would do it.
And how does it work today? Is it difficult to find musicians? Are there less people playing strings today than there were, 50 years ago?
Yes, it is more difficult, and I'm fortunate that we still have enough musicians in Las Vegas, although not nearly as many as we once had. Because you remember when every hotel on the Strip had a full orchestra of at least 18 or 20 people. That doesn't exist anymore. Right now, the only two orchestras that are working are mine and the one at Showstoppers at the Wynn.
Right.
And that's the first time that's happened in a long time. But we still have a wonderful pool of musicians here. If people who come to see our show, the average age of my orchestra is considerable. The string players are the youngest
I was going to say that I was surprised that there were so many young string players.
Yeah, that's good. I'm really delighted that that's the case. There's no less talent in young people today than there was when I was young. It's just that they don't get exposed to the music. The music that's popular these days, by comparison to the music that was popular when I was a kid, that music is at a level so low it's hard to understand how anybody can appreciate that. I certainly can't. But the talent is out there. I've heard some young musicians that are phenomenal, but they don't get the opportunity to play the kind of music that we feel is much higher caliber.
You know, it seems that as time goes by, instruments go in and out of style. I mean, it becomes cool or not cool to play a particular instrument. I mean, like when I was growing up, like, it was a big thing. Everybody played clarinet and saxophone.
Yeah.
But now you see there's a lot of particularly young female string players that kind of make it a little sexy, and at the same time that they're playing.
Well, a string instrument is a difficult instrument to play. It takes a lot of study to play the instrument correctly and to play the kind of music that demands technical facility. The same thing is true of woodwind instruments, the flutes, the clarinets, the bassoons, that type of saxophones. Trumpets, very difficult. You have the armature that has to be developed and the practice. My son is a trumpet player. He plays the Jersey Boys show. He plays Celine. He plays Santa Fe. I mean, he practices hours every day just to keep it. That kind of dedication seems to have been lost on a lot of young people because the music isn't demanding enough to require that. And you know, most of these songs that you hear have two or three chords, and that's it. You know, it's a repetitive over and over and over again.
Or you can reproduce it electronically.
Yeah, and that can be done also. Yes.
Yeah. You started playing the piano
Yes.
when you were very young.
Yes, when I was 3.
Was that you obviously had a piano in your home?
Well, my parents sacrificed considerably to make sure that I had a piano in the house. Yes.
Well, how did that happen? I mean, you demonstrated an interest in the piano, and they went and got a piano?
My parents had a friend who was a piano teacher, and she sensed that I had some musical talent. I was 3 years old.
Now, how did she sense that when you were
I
3
don't
years
know.
old? Yeah.
I don't know, Ed. But she asked my parents if she could try to teach me to play the piano. Now, I have vague memories. You remember the old wind-up piano stools?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You remember those?
Yeah.
Well, I can remember
They put them in
sitting...
barbershops now.
I can remember sitting at a piano, barely being able to see over the keyboard, wound up all the way, obviously couldn't reach the pedals.
Right.
The way she taught me was that she would play something, and I was gifted with enough of a musical ear that I could do it. After I heard it, I could do it.
From your ear,
Yeah.
not from memorization.
Oh, no, from the ear, you know. And she started to teach me, and then eventually she turned me over to one of her students who was in college at the time, she was one of the greatest pianists I ever knew. She was a wonderful woman. She taught me until I went to college, and then, you know, went on from there.
So then you get educated in musical theory and...
Yes, yes. I was a classical pianist until I heard Stan Kenton. I said, whoa, what in the world is that, you know? And then I had to figure it out, and that's when I decided that that's really where I wanted to go. I wanted to go into the jazz idiom and then one thing led to another.
So what does a musical arranger do?
A musical director. Well, a director or an arranger, they're two different things.
Okay, what's the difference?
An arranger takes the music and orchestrates it for the orchestra, for whatever size the orchestra is. You have to understand that it takes a great deal of talent to be able to hear in your head what the trumpets and the trombones and the saxophones and when they play and how you put them together and the strings. That takes a tremendous amount of talent. And men like Nelson Riddle and Don Costa and Gordon Jenkins and so these people were geniuses, and they were able to do that. And there are people today that are able to do that. I do it to some extent, but I'm nowhere near as good at it as some of my contemporaries, some of my friends that do it. Even like Joe Lano, for instance. You know Joe. Joe, the guitarist here in town. This guy's a world-class orchestrator. A music director is where if you have the act for whom you are working, you make sure that the music that is provided for them is the way they want it, and you have to then know how to conduct an orchestra so that you keep it keep the orchestra with the singer. The orchestra has to follow the singer, not the singer follow the orchestra.
Oh, okay.
You know, and that's my job. My job is to make sure that that happens. And the dynamics, when it's to be loud, when it's to be soft, when it's to be slow, when it's to be rubato, all of those things are required of a music director, and that's what I do. And of course, I play the piano as well.
Yeah, and do it phenomenally.
Thank you.
Currently, you're working with Bob Anderson over at, as I said, at the
The Palazzo.
Palazzo or Venetian?
The Palazzo.
It's in between both.
Yeah, but it's the Palazzo
It's
Theater.
actually in the Palazzo Theater.
Right.
Okay. Well, actually, the theater where the Jersey Boys used to be.
That's correct.
Right?
That's right.
Very easy to get to, by the way. I found the back way into that theater.
Yes.
Yeah, from the garage. You know, Bob's been on the show. We've talked about how amazing this show is, and we've talked about all the makeup he goes through. But,
Yes.
I mean, but he also has a great voice and a great talent.
Well, that's the only way that he's the only guy that in the world, as far as I'm concerned, right now, that can do this. Because one of the reasons is not only is he a fine actor, but he, in his own right, is one of the best singers with whom I've ever worked, and he's recognized by Tony Bennett and Jack Jones and all these people. They recognize Bob, the great singer that he is.
Right. So we have a little video of a rehearsal that you and Bob Anderson were doing, right? This is you rehearsing, I think. I got you under my skin.
Could be.
So we get a little inside look at how this thing really works.
Okay.
Okay. Be right back.
You start at a piano, and the time you get done, you're at a mezzo forte. Okay? Ba, ba, ba. What bar is that?
39.
Is it 39? Okay, here we go. A 1, 2, 3.
Listen to this band here. I would sacrifice.
Because he's coming back in now. Okay? Fine. All right. For the sake of doing it over again, I mean, we have to sight read it, and don't get me wrong, you guys are doing a great job. This is what rehearsals are for. Let's go right from where you guys came in, okay? You know where that is? What the bar number where we started with you guys?
Oh, 39.
39.
Last time?
39. Okay with you? Okay, here we go. It's starting to creep up in tempo. You got to hold it in the groove. Okay? Here we go. A 1, 2, 3.
I would sacrifice anything, come what might, for the sake of having you near. In spite of a warning voice comes in the night and repeats how it yells in my ear. Don't you know, you fool, you haven't got a chance to win. Why not use your mentality? Get up, step up to reality. And each time I do, the thought of you makes me stop. Alright again, 'cause I've got you under my skin. And I like you under my skin.
Now, when you work with your orchestra at the Palazzo, you have what, 32 pieces?
31.
31 pieces.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the sign says 32, so I'm
Right.
trying to figure out, maybe I should add a harmonica or something.
That takes a lot of rehearsal, a lot of preparation. We saw some of what goes on in rehearsal.
Well,
yeah.
this was the Springfield Symphony.
Right.
They're not accustomed to playing this kind of music, so it takes me long. The people with whom I'm working now, they require rehearsal, but nowhere near as much because they're familiar with what the style, they're familiar with what I expect of the orchestra, they're familiar with the dynamic. You notice that I was trying to make the orchestra understand that there are places where you have to be quiet, there are places where you have a crescendo. This is what makes the music into the music. Sinatra once said, we were talking about it, he said, if you just play the notes, it doesn't mean anything. It's got to have the expression, which is what made him so great when he sang.
Feeling.
So with the orchestras here in Las Vegas, I have the creme de la creme in my orchestra, you know. These people respond very quickly, and they love it. They look forward to coming to work every night, and it's a team effort.
So what happens somebody, one of your string players is not there, or your horn?
I have substitutes.
Okay.
Yeah, I have substitutes,
Yeah.
and that happens. We had an unfortunate situation. Fortunately, turned out great. One of my trumpet players had a mild heart attack and had to take a week off. Fortunately, he's fine and he's back. But we have people. My son comes in and subs once in a while when he can, because he's in the Jersey Boys show. And so we have people that are able to come in and take over when necessary.
Is that cool when you're playing with your son? You like that?
That's that's an amazing. I look up in the orchestra. I'll tell you a story that's so funny. You know, I was Stephen Eady's music director. Steve Lawrence is one of the greatest singers of our time, and also one of the nicest people you could ever imagine. So we're rehearsing one day, and my son is playing trumpet. And the average age of the trumpet section was probably in the early 60s. And my son, Steve, while we're rehearsing, I'm at the piano, Steve comes over to me and he whispers in my ear, he says, "Hey, Vinny, which one of those guys is your son?"
Good sense of humor,
Oh,
too.
he's the best.
And so your son grew up, obviously, with a love of music, and you have another son as well?
My other son's a drummer. He lives in California. He doesn't make his living as a musician, but he's a wonderful drummer.
So there was always music in your home growing up, right?
Always, yes.
I want to talk to you a little bit about Sinatra. Now, you did write a book.
Yes.
I should mention that. Frankly, Just Between Us.
Yes.
Kind of traces your life and then how you met Sinatra
And then what happened to my life as a result of being with him. Yes, and all of the other people with whom I've had the great honor to work. That's what the book is. I wrote the book as a tribute to him, as a thank you to the man that gave me a career I could never have had without his support.
And there's a lot of people that feel the same way. I mean, you hear all these stories about Sinatra. You don't know what to believe, what not to believe.
I can tell you this: we all have our faults, and he had his. But this man had a great heart. He was a donor to people who needed it. I could tell you story after story of things that he did without any recognition for
Just
people.
quietly.
Very quietly. He was great to me. He was great to my father and my mother. He was great to my kids. I can't say enough good things about him.
When you conduct now, or direct now for, what you're doing, like 22 different songs, Sinatra songs, something like that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is there one more difficult than another?
Yeah, there are some that are more difficult than others because they require more sensitivity in terms of their interpretation. Ballads particularly, like My Heart Stood Still. The ones that are a little easier are the ones that start off in tempo and have tempo all the way to the end, and they're all challenging, but some require more understanding, which is what he taught me. It's hard to explain because it requires some knowledge of what music means and what it is. Music is just not notes on the paper. Music is the expression of passion and love and so forth, and that has to be communicated to the orchestra from the director's standpoint.
Did Sinatra have a favorite song?
Not to my knowledge. There were so many. There were so many that were great. He had some that he didn't like.
Well, did he stop singing them, or?
Yes, he did. He never sang "Strangers in the Night" except when we were abroad.
Why was that?
He didn't like
the
it.
tune?
No.
But it was such a popular song.
You know have you ever seen the film of our concert that we did in the Dominican Republic called Concert for the Americas?
No.
Well, that was with the Buddy Rich Band. It's shown on PBS frequently as a fun. We were there. We did "Strangers in the Night," and at one point he comes over to me at the piano, and I start to laugh. And people always want to know, what did he say to you? Well, what he said to me is, "That's the worst damn song I ever heard." And it cracked me up. See, but no, he didn't. He wasn't fond of that song.
Wow. And how about you? Do you have a personal favorite Sinatra song?
No, I mean, I could go from one to the next, and I mean, there's so many that are, those are the songs. That's the Great American Songbook. Those were written by the greatest composers of our time. All of them. They were incredibly talented, remarkable men who could write about love, the love of a man for a woman, or vice versa, in 50 different ways, and never say the same thing twice, and yet get it across. You know, that's what's missing today. That intimacy in music between the musician and the audience. To me, that's what's missing.
Yeah, and also the lyrics.
Wow, the lyrics.
I mean, some of the lyrics of the Sinatra song. I mean, my personal favorite was "Very Good Year."
It's one of mine too. That's Gordon Jenkins, and who did the arrangement on that. And
I mean, you can chart a man's life with that song.
Absolutely,
yes.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they just don't have words like that anymore.
No.
There's during the show. There's times when Bob Anderson, well, he's not times. He's in character. I mean, he becomes Sinatra.
Yeah,
I
he's
found
in character
myself
all the time.
halfway through the performance in forgetting that I was not watching Frank Sinatra. I mean, you literally lose track of that.
Yeah, he's very good
And you
at it.
kind of go back in time, 30 years, and so he. There's times when he does some, just talking, conversing, kind of ad libs. He's in character. Obviously, you're in character with yourself, right? You're being yourself.
Yes.
And but Bob Anderson has studied like every little Sinatra movement,
Yes.
every phraseology, and he just incorporates it all and becomes Sinatra for that hour and 20 minutes.
But the only reason he can do that is because he has the same ability to interpret the lyric of a song the way Mr. Sinatra did. That's the only way he can approach being the character. You have to have it in you. You can't just all of a sudden be him. And he knows that he's not him. I mean, that we all know that. But the idea here is to pay tribute to the man and the music. That's why it's Frank the Man and the music. The music is as important. And Mr. Sinatra was the first one to admit that, to me and to everybody. I mean, that was the whole thing. So this is an American. It's an American achievement that's acknowledged all over the world. Our music, and even in countries that think we're the worst people on earth, they love the music.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's a credit to the people who wrote this and to the people who interpreted it. And he was the leader. Sinatra was the leader.
I find it interesting that you knew Frank Sinatra very well and called him Mr. Sinatra. I didn't know him at all and called him Frank.
No, I never. He was a year older than my dad.
Uh-huh.
And I never called him Frank. I called him Mr. S or boss or whatever, but I couldn't do that. As a matter of fact, when I met Count Basie told me to call him Bill. I said, I can't do that. No way. Count Basie was one of my heroes.
Never even knew his first name. I always thought it was Count.
No, Bill Basie. Uh-huh. He was an amazing man, I got to work with his orchestra and with him, and got to know. It's just, to me, I think back and I marvel at the people that I came to know.
Yeah. How old was Mr. Sinatra when he died?
82.
82. And you look at somebody today like Tony Bennett, who's what,
88.
88.
Yeah, and he's incredible.
Yeah. So, what is your thoughts about Tony Bennett performing at 88 particularly with Lady Gaga? And
Well, she's a very good singer.
yes, she and pianist too.
Tony is he's the same thing as Sinatra. He has the incredible ability to understand the music and get it across. At 88, he's still going. I worked with Tony for many years. Jerry Lewis, 88, incredible talent. That's a genius. He's an absolute genius. Don Rickles, who I had to give up because of the show here, 88 years old, still kills him when he's
funny as hell. Just takes him a long time to get to the center of the stage.
Hey,
Yeah.
But the man he's phenomenal. He's a one of a kind. There is no one that can do what Don Rickles does. Nobody. And nobody can do what Jerry Lewis does. Look at the achievements this man has had in his lifetime. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. These people
And I can
just
call
have
these
that
guys
longevity.
I can call these guys my friends. You know, do you know what an honor that is to me? It's incredible as far as I'm concerned.
we talked about your kids. You know, Frank Sinatra, I mean, it must have been difficult for Frank Sinatra's kids to grow up under the shadow of Frank. I mean, for a while it seemed like Frank Jr., after Frank died, would be able to, you know, at least step into some sort of role like
Well,
that.
he has. I think Junior has recorded a couple of albums, and I think Junior is singing better than he's ever sung in his life, and I think he's singing very, very well, very well. I like him. I think he's a good man. I think he's got a good heart. I imagine it was difficult for them to grow up as...
And Nancy also has a terrific voice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And now she has the show on Sirius XM, Seriously Sinatra, you know,
Yes,
Channel
yeah,
71.
yeah.
She's got the show called Nancy for Frank, and she does a wonderful job.
Yeah, we should mention that
Yeah.
Sirius has a channel
71,
devoted to
yeah,
71
devoted,
to
yeah.
Frank Sinatra and contemporary artists and music,
That's correct.
right?
Yep.
And she is kind of a MC. Or
Well, she has her own show
Yeah.
that's 2 or 3 times a week on the
Right.
show, and it's called Nancy for Frank, and she plays not only him, but everyone who does the Great American Songbook.
So when you're up there with Bob Anderson, you have these flashbacks from the 70s. I mean, do you ever, forget the time and place where you are?
No,
No?
no. I've been asked that question before. It's funny. It's hard for me to explain. For me, it's a wonderful thing to be able to do this because Mr. Sinatra wanted it. Mr. Sinatra would be a big supporter of this show. I can tell you that right now.
Right.
He wanted this music perpetuated. He told me that. He said, as a matter of fact, one of the things he told me was when he felt he was no longer able to perform on stage, that he was going to take me and we were going to go around to the major music schools in this country and he was going to teach. Unfortunately, that didn't happen because of his
Health.
his health and what have you.
But, yeah, but even if you guys would have done that, I mean, nobody could have emulated Frank Sinatra other than Bob Anderson.
Yes.
Hey, Vincent Falcone.
Yes.
I mean, his book's called Frankly Just Between Us.
Yeah.
You can't miss this show. My opinion, it's the finest show in Las Vegas.
Thank
at
you.
the Palazzo Theater.
Yes.
I brought my kids. I'm going to bring my mother. It's generation after generation will enjoy this show. Thank you very much, man.
Thank you, Ed.
Time can change many things, but what doesn't change is our commitment to serve you.
So if you've been injured in an accident, or if you need help in your Social Security or workers' comp case, we can get you the best possible result.
Enough said. Call Ed. EdBernstein.com.